very, very helpful during the 2008 crisis.
Thank you, Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for being here, Mr. Bernanke. Mr. Bernanke, let me start with a question coming from a slightly different direction. I think most Americans perceive today that the middle class is collapsing, poverty is increasing, real unemployment, as you know, is about 16%, 25 million people without jobs or underemployed. And yet at the same time, we have growing inequality, income and wealth inequality in America. Top 1% earn more income than the bottom 50%. The wealthiest 400 people own more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. And that gap is the greatest of any major country on earth. Do you believe that this economy will recover so long as we can continue to have this growing gap between the very, very rich and everybody else, where some people have so much and so many people have so little? Are you concerned about that issue?
I am concerned, Senator. I've spoken on this issue. It's not a recent development. You know, it's been happening since at least the late 70s that the inequality has been increasing, and at the top in particular, there's been increased income. There's a whole variety of reasons for it. I don't necessarily know that the short-term recovery of the economy is crucially tied to it, although it would help to have broader-based purchasing power throughout the economy. But I certainly agree that it's a real concern, and that you know, it's something that we should try to address as a society.
In a similar vein, let me ask you this. Today we have on Wall Street, the 6 largest financial institutions have assets equal to more than 60% of the GDP. Are you concerned that after we went through the disaster of too big to fail a few years ago, that with that type of concentration of ownership, where 3 out of the 4 largest financial institutions today are bigger than they were before we went through the bailout, A, are you concerned that we're going to be in a position again where Congress is going to have to bail out these financial institutions who have not changed their ways, who are still into highly speculative activities? And B, are you concerned when you have so much concentration of ownership in these top institutions that this does not create in any way, shape, or form a competitive, dynamic economy?
Well, Senator, we very much supported the reforms in the Dodd-Frank Act, which are intended to eliminate or at least substantially reduce the too big to fail problem. And as I was saying to the Congressman Brady, we no longer have the authority at the Federal Reserve to bail out anybody, and you know, it's our anticipation that Congress will never have to bail anybody out, because we've now put in resolution authority, we put in extra supervision, more capital, and so on.
Be that as it may, I'm not quite so confident that that reality may not come again. But here's my question. When you have 6 financial institutions with that much economic power, why shouldn't we break them up? I mean, do you believe that an institution is too big to fail, it should be allowed to continue? Why don't we break them up, provide more competitive aspects to the economy?
Well, the authority is there if we determine that they present a grave threat to the economy.
You believe they? Do you believe? If you were sitting where we were, would you be supportive of breaking up these large financial institutions?
I think I would look and see how the market works here. There are benefits to size. The 60% of GDP you mentioned is much smaller than many other countries that have banks that are bigger than their GDP. I think the right response is to put extra cost, extra supervision on these firms that will give them an incentive to eliminate unnecessary size, to eliminate unnecessary activities, and to reduce their risk-taking, and that's what Dodd-Frank attempts to do.
My last question is this. I secured a provision in Dodd-Frank, which you were not too enthusiastic about, as I recall, which allowed for an audit of the Fed during the financial crisis. And what we learned is that the Fed provided, in a revolving way, some $16 trillion in low-interest loans to every financial institution in this country, many of the central banks throughout the world, many large corporations in America, many very wealthy individuals. My question is this, that at a time when large banks have parked over $1 trillion at the Fed, why aren't we doing the same, providing low-interest loans to small businesses so that they can create jobs? In other words, if you, during the financial crisis, provided $16 trillion to banks all over this world, why are you not providing the kinds of money that small businesses now desperately need so they can expand and create jobs?
Well, Senator, first, as you pointed out, this is revolving. So many of these
Yes.
loans were overnight.
Yeah, I understand that.
And over again. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913 to address financial panics. And like all central banks around the world for 300 years, the way we do that is provide backstop liquidity during a panic when financial institutions lose their funding. And it is very much in the interest of the broader economy and the average person that we prevent the collapse of the financial system. It is not our role, and we do not have the authority to make general loans to the broader.
But you do have the authority, some would disagree that whether you should have that authority, to deal with unemployment. Unemployment is a crisis situation now. Why aren't you doing for small business what you did for the large financial institutions?
Well, we are addressing unemployment, and I just discussed in my testimony the aggressive steps we're taking to ease monetary policy, which is our main tool to
Are you
address
prepared to provide low-interest loans to small businesses in the same way you provided it to large financial institutions around the world?
I don't think that's our role, and I'm sure we don't have the authority to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Bernanke. I'd like to first follow up a little bit on what